Welcome everybody, I'm John Wally, and today's episode we're going to do a deep dive on how to migrate from Tenable Core that's on CentOS 7 over to Oracle Linux 8. I'm going to tell you these are going to be some advanced techniques. It's going to take a little bit of scripting. We're going to do a good bit of command line to make sure that this is all done in a way that's going to make sure that there's no errors in the back end in the future. All right. So why are we doing this? Well, there was an announcement that was put out a while back by Tenable that they were moving their Tenable Core operating system away from CentOS and onto Oracle Linux 8. I have a screen up now that's talking about this migration where they're going into effect where CentOS will be end of life on June 30th of this year. So in order to handle that, if you're out there and you're running on Tenable Core, running Tenable OT Security, there's going to be a point where it's end of life and it's no longer going to be supported. So getting all of your data, everything that's been running from one system over to another smoothly may be challenging because the whole underlying operating system needs to be changed. Now I know Tenable's working on scripts to make this happen, but these scripts are, the way they end up working is they move a lot of the data into a new partition, they wipe partitions, they set up new partitions, all in the back end of a script. So that's a really difficult way to kind of ensure that your application is still working. So the way we're recommending doing it, the way I'm recommending doing it, is to go in and build a brand new system off of their downloads. So let's go look at downloads. We're going to jump in and then I'm going to kind of explain what I've set up just to save us some time as we go through these videos. So first and foremost, you're going to want to stand up a version of Tenable OT that is on Oracle Linux 8. If you're currently running on CentOS, that's okay. We just want a brand new instance that we're running that's also on Oracle 8. If you do not have that capability and you're not running virtualized, you're running on hardware, you can skip the first parts of this, get your downloads once you upgrade, and then we'll go from there. And as we're going through these videos, I'll talk about how to do this. You're going to see this in a virtual environment, but you can also do this in a hardware environment. All right, so the first thing you want to do is get an offline version of Tenable Core plus Tenable OT Oracle Linux 8. And you'll know it's Oracle Linux 8 versus CentOS because it will have in parentheses the OL8 beside it. So if we scroll down through here, we'll go down to Tenable Core plus Tenable OT OL8. You want to download the offline version of the ISO. Now the versions may be a little bit different depending on when you're seeing this video, but this will work exactly the same way for any future versions that are coming out. So you're going to want to download Tenable Core OLA OT offline ISO. This is true if you're working on hardware or if you're working in a virtual environment. Either way, this is the ISO that you want to download. Once you download that, we're going to talk about some of the first steps that you're going to want to do. If we go to our Tenable OT, you want to make sure that you're running on the version 3.18 or the latest version that's out there. If it's 3.19 when you're watching this video or any future versions that are out there, you want to make sure that you're on at least 3.18. There are some pretty big changes in 3.18, and that's why I want you to go to there, because you do downloads and backups differently in 3.18 than you do previous versions. The other thing is anytime you're backing something up and trying to restore files, you want to make sure that your backup comes from the same version that you're restoring to. So if you're currently on 3.16 or 3.17, one of the first things you're going to do is upgrade your system to at least 3.18.51. So I'm going to go ahead and go in and log into the back end. Now to make it easy to follow these videos, the way I've set my labs up is that I have a Tenable Core CentOS and I have a Tenable Core OL8. So you can see the difference in these two when we log in, when we're moving data, and hopefully it will help you track along. You can follow it in the URL. In addition to the URL, I put some branding inside the actual instances so you can see those as well. So let's go ahead and log in to our CentOS version that's currently running. If you're on hardware in your CentOS, that's fine as well. So we're going to go ahead and log in here. We're going to make sure we check the reuse my password for privileged task, and we're going to click login. Now the first thing I want to do is go to OT Security, and I want to make sure that if I'm on the 3.18.51 or higher version. If you're not, and you have a version that's here that's higher than your current version, you'll have a little blue button here and you'll want to upgrade. Once you upgrade, you want to make sure that you check your system is functioning properly. Once it is, you want to go do a backup. So we're going to step in first about how do you do the backups. If you're on hardware or if you're on software, this backup's going to work exactly the same way. So I'm going to go down to backup and restore. And you're going to notice up at the top, it's going to say no backups can be taken until remote storage is configured. Don't let this scare you. It does not have to be remote storage. It can still be local storage, but we got to set it up. So you can do that by clicking here, as it says, or you can go to remote storage. Here we can say the recommended model you'll see is remote, but for what we're doing, we want it to be local. So we're going to grab local, and then that's all we have to do to set up this configuration. Now we can go to backup and restore, and it now will allow us to say we can take a backup. All right, so then all we got to do is click OT Security, and we're going to say take a backup now. This will take a little bit of time. On average, it'll take about 10 to 15 minutes. I'm going to keep the video running and we'll fast forward through this portion. All right, it looks like our backup has completed. Now this is an important component. If you have a backup from a version earlier than 3.18, the process that we're going to be walking through will not work. So in the way you can tell the difference, if you did your backup through the GUI of the main application and not through Cockpit on port 8000, this process will not work. So this is why you have to be on 3.18 or greater, because now the backup functionality is within Cockpit. The way that those backup files are created previous to 3.18 is completely different. So the customization of these backup files that we were walking through will not work for a restore on a new system. So this is very, very important. The next thing we're going to do is once this is done, we're going to go over and we're going to click this download button. And so now we should be able to download this, and I'm just going to put it into my downloads. All right. So while this is downloading, we're going to talk a little bit about what's in here. So I've made sure I got my backup, but there's some other things I want to do. And I mentioned this before, that I want to make sure that my system is up and running after I've done an upgrade, and that there's no like strange bugs going on the back end. So I'm going to log in to my main interface. And we just want to verify that everything is good. So it looks like my risk panels are working all right. My inventory seems to be accurate. My policies and events are happening. I'm going to go down to each one of my events and make sure that I'm getting good data on these. I see configurations, SCADA. We don't have any SCADA events on this network. I didn't load any of those. Any network threats, any events that are out there, any policies. One of the things that you can do is I have some customized policies in here. I can do this by doing U3. I just happen to know where they are. And so you'll see that I've created some user policies here that I created to make sure that my policies are moving over with my backup. I'm going to go to inventory, and you'll see I have a fair amount of assets here. That's good. My controllers are working. My network assets are working. My network map is generating, and that looks good. I have vulnerabilities that are showing up. If I go into my active queries, I see that my settings aren't default. that I have all of my active queries in place. And so everything's looking good here. I have packet captures. It looks like they're turning on, it's turned on and they're completing. And if I go under my local settings and environmental configuration, you'll see that my asset settings are in here. And I'm saying that I'm collecting on 192.168.0.0 and 10.100.0.0/16. So I have two primary networks that I'm on. So it looks like we are set to go. If you're on hardware and you've downloaded your backup, you know that everything's running, it's time to shut your system down and do a complete rebuild. Now this particular video is not going to be about how to rebuild or install on hardware. I have some other videos on how to do that. So we're assuming you already know how to set up a system, how to rebuild it, if it's on hardware, how to set up your console cable, and how to rebuild off of flash drives. So we're not going to be covering that portion. Now that we have everything done, everything's downloaded, everything's good, I'm actually going to close these two panels out. We're not going to be working from our Tenable Core CentOS versions any longer. Once everything stood up and you have your OL8 version up and running, you want to make sure that your licenses are activated, that everything is good to go from there. So I'm going to go in. You'll see that now we're running on Tenable Core OL8. I've set up the basic wizard. We have an IP address to it, as you can see here. It's translating, and we could go to OL8 here as well. As a matter of fact, I'm going to do that just so that we're not confused here about which operating system this is. We'll duplicate this. And I'm going to get rid of the 8000. There. So now so we're not confused, we have our primary login and we have our cockpit login on port 8000. So the first thing I want to do is find a way to get my data up to my core platform. So before we do that, I want to talk a little bit. If you haven't seen my other series on installing, if you happen to do this on OVA, you're going to notice that you have some immediate problems. So I'm going to log in here and we're going to talk about some of the storage problems that you may be running into. All right. So now we know that we may or may not have room in our normal home admin directory. So that means we need to do a little bit of moving around. So I'm going to make sure, even though it looks like I probably have room to do this in this video, I'm doing it to the, if you installed with that 205, I will guarantee you will not have room to expand this file and work with the backup file from that directory. So what we're going to do is go into a directory that we do have room, and we saw this under our PCAP, like I said. So we're going to go into our actual terminal. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is change directories to that PCAP directory. So I'm going to say change directory var/PCAP. Then we want to create a directory. So to create this directory, we need to be an administrator because of where we're at. So we're going to sudo make directory, and I'm just going to call this directory temp. Then I want to change the owner, because if we look, right now the owner is root. So if we try to upload a file to temp, we're not going to be able to do that. So we want to change the owner to our admin user. So I'm going to sudo here. I'm going to change owner, and I'm going to say admin for temp. I can do an LSLA again. And you'll see now temp's owner is admin and admin. And the reason we want to do this is we need to move this file up to this directory. So now we're done here. We have space for this. We've downloaded our file. So now we want to switch over to PowerShell. So I'm going to open up a PowerShell window or a shell of your own Windows, so our terminal, on terminal on Linux, so that we have a way of moving the file up. So I've pulled up a terminal here because I'm on a Windows system currently, and I'm going to change directories to my downloads folder. I'm going to dir, and you should be able to ls as well, and I can see my backup file. So the first thing I want to do is move this file up to our system. So I'm going to do a secure copy, or SCP. I'm going to tell it that I want to move my Tenable file there. I'm going to tell it I want to log in as admin. I want to go to my OT Core-OL8 server. You can put in an IP address here as well. I'm going to put a colon, and then I want it to go to my var pcap/temp folder. All right, so now we know where we want to put this file. I'm going to hit return. It's going to ask me if I want to fingerprint the system. I'm going to say yes, and you have to type out the whole word yes, not just Y. I'm going to hit return. It's going to ask me for my password to admin. I'm going to enter the password and hit return, and it will begin uploading that file. Now this is important. If you do not change the owner of that file, you're not going to be able to upload it. It's going to tell you that the permissions, you didn't meet the permissions, and it'll deny it. All right, we'll speed the video up here a little bit until we get our file uploaded. All right, it looks like we're complete. So we can exit out of this window. We can go over to our new OL8, and we can do a change directory over to temp, and we should see our file there. Do an ls on this, and it looks like we're good. Admin owns this file. That's perfect. All right. So now we need to do a few other pieces before we start working with our backup file. Because the system is where it's at, we need to stop all of the containers from running. So that's going to be our first step. The way we do this is we're going to sudo systemctl stop anthology. And if you're not familiar with the anthology service, it is the service that controls all the containers that are running in Tenable OT. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to stop anthology. All right, it looks like everything stopped. Just to make sure, I'm going to do a docker ps-a that will tell me the condition of all of my containers. And it looks like all of my Docker containers are now down and stopped. So let's clear our screen. And now we need to do a little bit of work on the system itself. So I'm going to do a cd opt indigy. And I'm going to do an ls here. And you'll see there's a bunch of files under this directory that we have to work with in this backup. All of these database files that we see actually need to go away. And that sounds like a scary thing. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a sudo here. We're going to do a remove-rf. Be very careful with this command. And we're going to do a *db*. I'm going to hit return, and all of our DB files should be gone. I'm going to do a listing here, and we should not see any more files that have this DB command, a DB portion in it. The next thing I want to do is also remove anything related to a machine ID. If we go through here and you look to the top, you'll see this machine ID. We also want to remove anything that's in that folder. So I'm going to cd to my machine ID, and you'll see that there's an ID file in here. I'm going to say remove ID, and I'm going to have to sudo for this as well. All right, we'll look in here and now the file is empty. So now we're good. We've cleaned up our current system. We don't have any existing database files in here, and we've removed our machine ID. It's important that we remove the machine ID because we need to pick up the ID of our existing machine and make sure that it's overwritten. All right. So now that we can go back to where our original file was located, where we did our backup. So I'm going to cd to our var pcaps temp folder. And I want to work on creating a file here. So I'm going to do a listing to make sure that it's in here. And I am going to vi something like restore.sh. All right. I'm going to do the insert key. I'm going to go ahead and set this up so the system knows that this is a bash file, just in case. I'm going to hit return, and I'm going to paste this information in just so this is a little bit faster, and you know that there's not any typos in there or anything like that. So what this is going to do is we have a couple of loops in here. We're going to wait about 5 seconds between these just so that it doesn't overrun anything. And we're going to look inside our tar files for very specific files. Now you remember we deleted all of our DB files. So now we're going to replace those DB files from the backup that we had. And we removed our machine ID. So we're going to replace the machine ID from the backup that we had. That's really all this is. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to write quit. And we have our file. The next thing I want to do is change the permissions on the file. So I'm going to say change mod. I'm going to put 755 just so we know that now this script can run. So if I do an ls space -la, now we have our restore script in here as well. Now before we can run our script, we actually need to untar. From the very first part of this, we're going to untar part of our backup. So the way we do that is we're going to say tar xvf and put the name of our backup file. This will output several files for us, and you see that they're all this tar.xz name. And that'll make a little more sense why we wrote the script the way we did. So now if I do an ls here, you can see that we have all of these backup files. If we look at the permissions on it, just to make sure that admin can do this and read the file, we're good. So the next thing we want to do is actually run the script that we had. So I'm going to say sudo sh restore, and it'll run through our script and hopefully restore our system. If you see failure, it didn't see this, it didn't see that, you can ignore it. It's just looking for very specific items within there, and then it passes it. So you don't need to worry about the errors that you see in here where you see the failure. It's just because it's looking for different IDs in our archive. All right, so this means we should now be in a place where we're good to go. I'm going to do an ls here. I'm going to cd back, and we should be able to remove our temp folder now. Before I do that cleanup though, I want to make sure that everything is good and I've restored all my files. So I'm going to do a ls of our initial opt/indigy folder. And now you'll see that all of our DBs are in there. The next thing I want to do is do that for machine ID. And you'll see that our ID file is back in there. So we know that now that we ran our script, it pulled out all of our database files, it pulled out our machine ID. That's all we really needed out of all that backup. So that's why we wanted to write this script, because we did a full backup from the CentOS into the OL8, it would have actually broke our application, because the way that the application runs on OL8 is very different than the way the application runs on CentOS. So we didn't need all of our backup. We just needed our database files and our machine ID. So we should be in a good state now. So now that I know that everything's been backed up and everything's good there, I can remove this temp directory. So I'm going to say rm and get rid of our temp directory. So now we're freeing our space back up for all of our PCAPs that are out there. And I'm just going to do an ls to make sure that it's gone. All right, so we should be good to go. Now, before when we were looking at it, we saw all this data, but our Oracle 8 was completely brand new. There was nothing in there. We enabled it, and that was it. So now I'm going to go ahead and reboot my OL8 system. I can do this several ways. I can go into my regular overview of the system and hit reboot. I could have done that command line as well, but so that you can see this, I'm going to hit reboot. I'm going to tell it to reboot with no delay, and we're going to hit reboot here. And this will take 2 or 3 minutes for us to go through and reboot the system. All right, we're going to see if we've been able to reconnect, if we're rebooted. All right, this is a good sign. I'm going to log in as my admin. And it looks like we can log in. So that's the first step. We could go and check and see if our containers are up yet. And it looks like my containers have been up for about 30 seconds. So the next thing I'm going to do is go to OL8. Let's refresh. And you're going to notice that now we have this bad request. I actually created this on purpose. If you've been using a URL and you've been forwarding to that, or you have DNS going that way, all of a sudden you're going to have an error in here. This is a normal error. You can get around it in the very beginning by going to the IP address. So I'm going to replace this with our actual IP. So I'm going to say 10.2.9.221, and we'll be able to log into OT Security. I'm going to put in my username. My password, and we're going to log in, and you'll see we're at a stage where we have to re-up our license. We're going to generate a certificate. We're going to copy it to our clipboard. We're going to say done. We're going to go to activate, and you'll see I'll do this for an evaluation. I'm going to paste this into our evaluation. I'm going to re-enter my license code. I'm going to read my terms and say I've agreed, and I'm going to generate my activation code. I'm going to copy my activation code, enter activation, paste that in, and say activate. So we are good to go. Now you'll notice that now our new system says CentOS. This is because this means our backup worked. If we go in, we have our full inventory, we have our events, we have our policies. If we go into policies and I search on U3, you'll see that our user policies made it over. There were several groups that we created. If I go into asset groups, I can see my user defined groups came over. And so all of my data is good. Even my new banner is up here. If I go into my system environmental configurations, I do asset settings, you'll see that now my 2 ranges are in here that are set up the same way. So we've completely migrated over from one to the other. So, but remember that error we had? We need to go in and fix that error. So if you go in, we'll see this configuration is set. I'm going to go to cancel out of this. I'll go to system configuration. I'm going to go to my device. I'm going to scroll down, And we do a couple of things here. Number one, I want to edit this because this is no longer CentOS. This is OL8. I'm going to change this to red since it's Oracle. We're going to hit save. The second thing we want to do is go change our URLs. So before we said our URL is OT Core CentOS because that came over from our backup. We're going to edit this now to say that it is OT Core OL8. We're going to apply it and restart. And this will be the last restart we need to get rid of that error that we saw when we originally went into this system. All right, it looks like we're restarted. So just to make sure we're not getting that error anymore, I'm going to change this to our OT Core OL8 and make sure we can get to our interface. And you see that now that error is gone. We'll log in one last time. And we are all set. We have our accurate banners. We're going to our OL8 version when it comes to our DNS and our host name, and all of our data seems to be moved over. So thank you everyone for joining this video. If this has been helpful, please like. If you have any comments or questions, or you're running into problems in this migration from going to CentOS to OL8 and making sure that your data is there, please feel free to post. I check my comments every day. Thank you and have a great day.